Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another great seminar with IOP Fellow Laura Washington. This event is part of the newly formed ChiElect program, covering the issues, concerns, and candidates sure to play a major role in Chicago's upcoming mayoral election, which is next Tuesday, February 26th. Laura Washington brings extensive knowledge of Chicago politics and journalism to the IOP. She has served as an editor for the Chicago Reporter, a nationally recognized publication covering race and poverty, and as well she served as deputy press secretary to Harold Washington, Chicago's first African-American mayor. She is currently a columnist for the Chicago Sun-Times and a political analyst for ABC7. We are also delighted to have mayoral candidate Neal Sáles-Griffin here this afternoon to discuss his vision for the city of Chicago and why he is running for mayor. Mr. Sáles-Griffin is a highly regarded tech entrepreneur in the city of Chicago, named to Crain's Chicago Businesses 40 Under 40 in 2013. He is currently the CEO of Code Now, which is a nonprofit that teaches coding to low-income high school students. Mr. Sáles-Griffin is a lifelong Chicagoan from right here in Hyde Park. Today's seminar is on the record, which means you are free to take photo and video, and then students will also have the opportunity to ask questions closer to the end of the seminar. Let's get started and welcome Laura Washington and Neal Sáles-Griffin.
Thank you, sir.
Right.
Welcome.
See you again.
Yeah, and you're. I was going to say welcome to campus, but I don't have to welcome you.
I'm
to this
home.
campus and this is home because you teach here.
I
and
work
you're
here.
from Hyde Park. And
Yep.
What do you do here?
I got the payroll. Yeah. I teach Tuesday afternoons. I help with a coding and software development class. So I've done it through Booth and also through the econ department. So even while running for mayor, I've been teaching software development and coding on Tuesday afternoons on campus.
And what's the connection between coding and being a mayor?
Well, problem solving, right? So I didn't teach myself coding 10 years ago because I just wanted to be a coder. I saw an opportunity to get a skill that allowed me to see the world in a way that created more room and more spaces for me to actually think through how can it actually help more people, right? And as I thought through all those different opportunities, it was very clear as a venture capitalist and as a tech entrepreneur that the technical skill set was one that not only I wanted and needed, it was one that I wanted to provide to thousands of other people. So I managed to do that through Code Academy and the Starter League.
And so you want to take that. Part of what you want to do as mayor is to take those skills and those experiences, and sort of in some ways redefine what it means to be a mayor, to run a city like Chicago.
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, it's actually more about helping other people get that skill. Because a good example is a lot of people talk about handouts and helping people, giving people fish. Willie Wilson's been giving out cash for the past year. And, while I respect helping other people get up that way, I think there's a larger opportunity to teach people how to fish, right? So as mayor, I think I can show people that through all the work that I've done in my adult life, it's always been focused on helping out people who have less to get more for themselves. And I think if you have a mayor with those values, with a track record of having done that, that might be a great opportunity for a lot of people.
And now you are, like you said, you lived in Hyde Park. You also lived in Kenwood.
Yeah.
What part of your childhood was in Hyde Park?
I could tell stories for days. So my mom and my dad weren't together, right? So they were separated. And my dad was a police officer. My mom worked for CPS. She actually taught for 17 years at Ray School, right around the corner from here. I went to Ray, and for part of the time, I couldn't. My mom couldn't stand me the whole time. But I could tell you stories for days about growing up in these two neighborhoods because there's such a contrast. And you're on Kenwood, and I'm like literally 3 blocks from Barack Obama's mansion, right? But my block was so different than his. When I came outside, there were days where I saw people walk up and gun people down. There were people murdered on my block. This happened even as early as last year. And in Hyde Park, though, you have these resources that don't exist in a lot of the surrounding neighborhoods. So I was able to experience the greatness of the South Side of Chicago, but also some of the dangers of being on the South Side of Chicago. And that, I think, is deeply kind of rooted in me. And as I think about those experiences, I can go from, learning ballet at the Hyde Park School of Ballet, it used to be called. Now it's the Hyde Park School of, what is it called now? Anybody know the name of the school over there? Hyde Park Dance Academy. The guy out there knows. So, I went from going to, learning ballet there to being in a position where, it's not safe to go out at night. You can't go for a walk. And I think those experiences are vitally important now to have leadership in Chicago that understands that struggle and that dichotomy.
And one of the things I remember we talked about last time we got together was another thing that motivated you was your family you have many family here in the Chicago area. At least you used to.
Yeah.
And now a lot of them have left. Talk about that and how that impacted your decision to run.
So my family is gigantic. I have 16 aunts and uncles, and they all grew up over here on the south side of Chicago. So they Inglewood, Roseland, South Shore, Bronzeville, Hyde Park. And when I took stock of my family situation and where they were at, this is a couple of years ago, because I got triggered because there was an article that came out basically describing Chicago as the only major city, top 10 city with a declining population. And that was intriguing. And then I said, okay, well, what's my situation? I realized more than half of my 100+ family members no longer live in the city of Chicago. So that was like such a stark moment for me. And when I get curious before I get judgmental, and I said, okay, well, what's going on here? Why are they leaving? And as I interviewed family members, I started interviewing non-family members, people who I was connected with, who knew someone who had recently moved. It turns out that people were leaving for very similar reasons across the board. The number one reason people leave was because they were planning a family, and they were going to have a kid, or they had a kid, and now they're trying to figure out where they want their kid to go to school. And when they look at their school choices and options with where they live, they're like, we can't live here anymore. We have to go. So I want to stay, but I have to go. They go out to the suburbs, they go to other cities, and that has been true for my family for my entire life. And because of that, as I traced these issues around safety, around schools, around economic opportunity and affordability, it became really obvious that the linchpin of the problem was the power concentration in the office of the mayor. The decision-making for the schools, the influence on city council, setting the budget, all of these parts and pieces were concentrated into one single person's position. And I wanted to distribute that power, so I read the municipal code, read through all the city budget documents. I was a total nerd.
You're probably the only candidate who's actually done that.
You know what? I straight up did it because because what do I know, right? I'm not the one that has all the political expertise, right? So I have to understand the law and the system. So I read through the system and the law, and as I looked at it, I realized, whoa, hold on. Chicago is a weak mayor government. What does that mean? Does anybody know that? What is a weak mayor government? And it turns out that the mayor of Chicago is actually supposed to be held accountable by the city council. That's laughable in this city, right? We have a boss for a mayor, and we always have. But that's not how our government was actually designed with that intention. So I just wanted to flip that, and I wanted to make that more true than ever.
So what's your strategy? What would you do as mayor to flip that? I mean, how would you distribute power? How would you govern equally with the city council?
Yeah, so it's term limits, campaign finance reform, and radical transparency of our budget and our decision-making process. Very straightforward. Early on when we first met, probably I was like wrestling with what that is. That's it. I can roll it off the tongue because if you knock out those three things, it's not a silver bullet, but that is the beginning of progress in Chicago that we have not seen in our lifetime. And right now, we have people that hold on to power for too long. That's why 1 in 3 millennials want to get out of the city right now. And then we also have this ridiculous problem of our city is for sale. Like, if you really think about it and break it down, there's somebody out there who's got more than enough money to just take $10 million and put it into one of our campaigns, because there's no limit. Any one individual who lives in the United States of America can give as much money as they want to anybody who's running for mayor right now.
Well, in fact,
that is absurd.
Bill Daley has received $2 million
got $2 million
already
from one guy.
And it's still early in the campaign.
Yeah.
So,
and what do they get for that? Yeah. Why is he doing it? So it just makes you wonder. And
what do you think they're getting?
Well, you don't have to wonder that much. I mean, so at the very least, let's just give him the benefit of the doubt. What he gets is a phone call. He gets a phone call. He gets to pick up the phone, and his influence will mean a lot behind the scenes, right? And that influence is absolutely inequitable. It's unacceptable to me to know that a millionaire is going to be able to tell our mayor what they should do before any one of us can. That's absurd.
And that's the reality, though. When you give candidates money, you have influence.
There it is.
Maybe whether there's a direct quid pro quo, and it's legal.
Yeah, it's completely legal.
So what would you do? I mean, so what are your ethics?
Small donor matching or the voucher system. So I've studied a lot of different cities and what they do. So I've been in the weeds. So I'm smiling because I've had so much fun learning and how important these positions are. But Seattle has the voucher system. New York has the small matching system. There are trade-offs and problems with all of these different approaches to it. But I will say that between the two, we should have a public conversation about it before I make a call. So if I become mayor, the goal is to basically present these proposals. I've already have ordinances from the past that we almost passed through City Council in 2016 that I've made modifications to.
Such as, give me an example. Of
So the
something
2016 ordinance was about small donor matching. So I forget which alderman presented it, was a champion for it, but we had it, and it did not exit out of committee. So it never saw the light of day.
What a surprise.
So yeah, no confusion there. But the other problem is that with the transparency piece, we don't actually record our committee meetings. Those aren't shared.
The council
right?
committee meetings.
That's right. You can go. And you have certain journalists that are amazing at tweeting about what goes down, and the Daily Line does a good job of highlighting like the main things that matter. But unfortunately, we are unlike most of our major cities in that we aren't actually allowing the public to get access to that information readily and easily. So there's just a lot of that where, again, I guess my tech background has something to do with it, but it's more just like open source, open data, and just transparency just as a value for me, that I think if you carry that into the mayor's office, the city could turn on a dime.
So you've kind of ticked off, I think, what sounds like the three most important issue areas for you: education, crime, and economic development.
That's what Ron ran on in 2011, though.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody runs on it. Everyone talks about it. So I had to figure out, how do I broaden the scope here? Because every politician, every candidate is talking about and saying the same things. And we all agree more than we disagree for the most part. If you apples to apples, look at all of our platforms and positions, and every forum and every debate, everyone's like, yeah, I agree with so-and-so, I agree. All right, so where do we disagree? What are the real differences? And for me, it was zooming out and talking about this.
Okay.
So it was about the money. So that was the root issue. Because when you talk about, so this is a receipt that I designed because I was going around when I had to get on the ballot, which was hell in a handbasket. I basically convinced people to sign my sheet because I said I was going to give them a receipt when they paid their taxes. So here's a prototype.
Your petitions you're talking about.
That's right, yeah. So you got to get 12,500 signatures, which is, I think, 12 times the amount you need to run for mayor in LA, and what was it, maybe 3 or 4 times the amount you need to run in New York. And so we pulled that off, but that kind of knocked me out the game for like 5 months, so that wasn't fun. But I promised them a receipt. And when I become their mayor, I'm going to give them an actual receipt. But this is one that shows you, with the analysis that we did of the 2018 budget, what $100 of your tax dollars allocate to in the city budget. So, and a lot of people may not be surprised by this, but the vast majority of our money goes to debt, police, pension, and finance.
What percentage of that $100?
That's about 50% right there. Yeah, so about half your $10 billion budget gets allocated to those categories. And that's, I'm not judging whether that's good or bad. I'm just saying we need to have the conversation about it.
People need to know. People need to
Well,
understand.
so here's the thing. There's a contrast here, and I don't mean to use this as an extreme prop, but debt's at the top, right? We're paying $20 on $100 in debt. But at the very bottom, there's this other line item that says regulatory, right? That's the Inspector General's office. That's ethics and enforcement. And here we have the most corrupt major city in the country. And we are massively underfunding and have not fully powered our Inspector General's office to actually root out the corruption in our city. And every candidate who's running for mayor is running on some component of a platform of ending government corruption. That's absurd. Our budget reflects our values.
80 cents.
Plain sight, 60 cents.
60 cents?
60 cents.
60 cents out
of
of
$100, 60 cents goes towards rooting out corruption.
How much should go toward it?
Well, so this is where it invites a larger conversation. I don't know. I don't know the specific number. But what I can say is what we are lacking right now in this race, and we only have days left, is a forecast, a true financial model. Like I have to build when I raise millions of dollars to run a tech company, or if I'm investing in a business, or if I'm running a nonprofit, or if I'm on a board, you have to show a pathway to solvency, to getting into the black. But we as candidates and as politicians are just telling you all the taxes we're going to put in and all of our plans and promises of how we're going to break that down, but we're not showing our work. We're not actually saying, here's a spreadsheet where I've showed you where things are, here are the taxes I'm saying I'm going to implement, here are the expenses I'm going to reduce, and here's where things will be. You all deserve that. And nobody's done it. I'm trying to do it. So for the past 3.5, 4 weeks, I had a team of financial analysts and experts and people who are familiar with city budgets, and myself worked on pouring through all of the city budget financial documents, and we put something on our website that shows you the 2018 budget, line by line, the breakdown. That is not easily accessible. You have to go through PDF documents and manually copy and paste lines, literally, to get this information like all in one place. And so we did that work, and I built a Google Data Studio model now that shows you kind of how I think, which is we talk about your money, then you can see, all right, $6 billion almost to CPS, how does that work? Why isn't that connected to the core city budget? All these questions that most people don't know, I guess I'll let the teacher in me like fully come out. But I want to show people how much I care about their budget reflecting our values as a city, and then we can make sure that their schools get better in their neighborhoods. Their streets get safer, not just by hiring more police officers and detectives, but also investing in restorative justice, violence prevention programs, mental health care services. And then on the job and economic opportunity front, we closed 50 schools, and the repurposing plan for that is all over the place. And instead, I mean...
You mean in terms of what Rahm Emanuel is proposing?
Yeah, what we're doing to repurpose those schools. And what I am proposing is this Office of Vocational Training, which in some form exists in New York. And I've interacted with some of the New York folks about how that works. But I pioneered this in Chicago, and I worked directly with the mayor on that project. And even though that work was great, and we had some great outcomes, and some people got jobs, and they're happy, it was a drop in the bucket compared to this larger problem we have on the south and west sides.
And what was that? So you said you pioneered that with the mayor. What did you do exactly with the
So
mayor?
we started the first coding school, the first coding boot camp in the country. That model didn't exist until two black brothers on the south side of Chicago pulled it off. And when we launched that program, we attracted people from all over the world, not just in the United States, from all over the world. They relocated to Chicago to go through our program. And when they went through our program, we didn't just teach them how to code. We helped them actually figure out what they wanted to do with their life, right? What kind of jobs they wanted, what kind of companies they wanted to start, what kind of problems they wanted to solve. And I saw people sacrifice so much just to have an opportunity to learn in our program. So we had folks who cashed out their 401ks, who sold their cars, sold their homes, relocated their entire families to Chicago, just to have this 3-month experience where coming out, after paying $6,000 or so, they were on track to make anywhere from $60,000, $80,000, even $100,000 within the next year or two. And that's like showing the work, right? That's like real work getting done. And those kinds of outcomes aren't necessarily tracked, or, we're not holding people accountable when they promise jobs or they make statements that are broad about how we're going to provide opportunities and jobs to people on the south and west sides. So I've done that my whole life, and hopefully as mayor I can make that more real and more granular than ever before.
Now, it seems like you've been pretty busy with this work and with this and studying the technology and coming up with this analysis, which is very impressive. But you've been very invisible for a good part of the campaign. You had a kind of a rocky kickoff for your campaign.
Right after we met.
Right.
Yeah, I had this launch event, and I just froze, man. I didn't know what to say. I stumbled over my words. I was super nervous. It happens to everybody. So
it was a spectacular setup. You had
it was amazing.
You were on this big stage. You were the man.
That's right.
But you kind of froze. You weren't focused, and you maybe talked a little bit too long. And I think a lot of folks were starting to question right at the beginning of your campaign: is this guy ready for prime time?
Totally, and that's reasonable, and I totally get that. But you know what? Those humbling experiences, when you get knocked down, you get back up.
Okay.
And people can relate to that. They know, because you can see yourselves in those moments, right, when you struggle. So the fact that I got back up, kept fighting, kept campaigning, and got on the ballot.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, got on the ballot, because that is a whole raid in itself.
And I know you feel that that's an important civic lesson, what you went through in terms of getting the signatures and then fighting to stay on the ballot.
That process is a microcosm of some of the problems we have in the city of Chicago. So, like I said earlier, to get on the ballot, you need to get 12,500 signatures. Not only do you need to do that, they have to be unique signatures, meaning they can't have signed for someone else, and they have to be physical signatures, in person, that you're collecting. So you can't get them digital, you can't ask people to mail it in, you've got to collect them yourself. And if you don't have tons of money and resources and a whole vast network of people that you can kind of cast out there, good luck pulling that off, right? That's what they said. You're not going to make it. I had so many people tell me I wasn't going to make it. And they were almost right. Because even though we got over 18,000 signatures, and I just grinded for months, day in and day out, 12 hours a day.
Did you have volunteers? Were you paying people? What was your strategy to
It was pretty much all volunteers until the final week. In the very last week, we had a gap that we needed to close. So we had 15,000 or so signatures, and I wanted to get to 18. So we ended up paying some of our volunteers to spend more time out there. And then there were folks on the street who I met who were circulating for other candidates. And when they saw me out there as a candidate doing it, which they had never seen before, they defected. So they joined me, and they were like, hey, can you, pay me $1 a signature? And I was like, yeah, man, I got you. So that's how we did it. And I mean, there could be a whole movie about that experience and how that works. But suffice to say, it is not designed for the little guy. It is not designed for people who don't have access to $1 million donors.
What about the challenge? Talk about it, because
once we submitted, that's right.
You weren't the only one that was challenged. A lot of folks were challenged, and some of them didn't make it.
Right.
Like Dorothy Brown.
So that's the other thing I was going to say, which is you said I've been invisible, but I'll say this: there were people who were more visible than me. 3 of them, in fact, who went to all the events and the forums and those things, who aren't on the ballot.
And that would be Dorothy.
That's Dorothy Brown, Troy LaRaviere, and Jamal Green. And there's other candidates too, but there's 21 candidates who submitted to run for mayor, and now we've got 14. So that, I think, is such an important lesson in how we have such a flawed system for democracy in Chicago, because it's just not designed for us. It's designed for folks who are in the know, who are in that circle, who are in that machine.
Give me an example. Like you spend a lot of time in the bowels of the Board of Elections, trying to
every day,
challenge,
all over the
fighting
holidays.
the challenges. So tell us a story, or tell us about what happens.
Oh, well, I'll tell you something that didn't happen to me, because I think the reason I got on the ballot is because I was nice. I was just a polite person, because it gets thick in that room. It's like it's a room like this, except there's like desks and Dell computers that are super old, and everyone's crammed up next to each other on these uncomfortable chairs. And you are there literally from you get in there at 8:30, and you don't leave until 8 p.m. They send you out at 7:45, so you're there that whole time. You get 2 short breaks and a lunch. Otherwise, you have to be there staring at that screen all day long, looking at signatures and signatures and signatures. So Willie Wilson challenged us. He also challenged all of the other black male candidates, I believe. And in those challenges, there was a lot of tension, not between me and Willie's team, because they actually ended up liking me. They wanted to help me by the end of it. But
he dropped the
challenge at the level, so we can talk about that too. But the story for you is Jamal Green, which is another mayoral candidate who's no longer on the ballot, and Willie Wilson's kind of challenge champion, Ricky Hendon, they had words. They almost got into a fight multiple times. There was shouting and screaming and cursing and disrespect and tension, and it really affected the whole vibe of everyone else who was in the room. And the police had to come. They had to file a police report. It was pretty dramatic. So I was just an observer of that, because we were just honestly happy to be there, because even though the process is terrible, I was so glad that I got to experience it firsthand, because then, very similar to when I taught myself how to code, right? I was holed up in my apartment in Hyde Park, and for a year, I just read dozens and dozens of books on programming and design and all these complicated things. And as I was going through that experience, I said, you know what? I want to make sure that no one ever has to experience what I'm going through ever again. And the same feeling has been in this election process when I was at the Board of Elections, going through this line by line, realizing that I collected all these signatures, I saw these people, I verified that they were registered to vote, and the person sitting next to me is telling me that this person isn't real. They're saying that they're fake. They're saying that the signature is made up, that it's inaccurate, that it doesn't count. And I'm like, I know it because I got them. I know that they're real.
So there's a lot of gamesmanship that goes on, and maybe misrepresentation, because it's all about winning, not necessarily about being honest or fair.
It's like it's almost like you're guilty until proven innocent with the challenge process, and that is just like a true failure of our democracy in Chicago. So that's just one small example. I could give you a dozen, but yeah.
Well, then even after you got on the ballot, I was like, hey, Neal, now we're going to see you do your stuff, because I think I think you were interviewed along the way, and you said, I'm just focusing on getting on the ballot. I don't have time and resources. Then after you got on the ballot, though, I didn't see you in a lot of the forums.
So I had to make an assessment. So I had to think about it. So we had to do some intense calculation. We had some meetings afterwards. Say, okay, now what do we do? Because there's a temptation to immediately just jump in and try to play catch up. Right? All right, so now I'm just going to do everything that all the candidates have been doing for months. I'm going to go to all the events. I'm going to do all the forums. I'm going to try to raise a bunch of money. But we've only got 5 weeks, right? This was almost like 4 weeks ago that we got on the ballot. So we said, all right, what is the greatest way for us to have the most meaningful impact on this election with the limited time and resources we have? And these projects that I'm talking about were in progress before I started collecting signatures, but they weren't complete. So the question was, do I see through this budget analysis? Do I see through this system to actually organize all of these questions that are asked at events and forums, but not really dug deep enough into? And do I see through my plan to actually provide a framework so that the public has a more transparent and open way to understand the value and the trade-offs of every platform position that all of my fellow candidates, including myself, have taken? And I decided that, for me, it was far more important to provide the voters with those resources than to just go around promoting myself. And that's just a sacrifice I made as a candidate.
So you're conceding that it's possible that you're not going to win.
Of course. Okay. I mean, that's
right. Well, that's refreshing because there's a lot of folks out there that
keep it real. You can't
that
be
are
delusional.
not even doing as well as you are. That are saying, I'm into the
whatever. Yeah. Look, if people like me, they like me, and I want to show people who I am. Right? I'm not going to be fake. It feels fake to try to go around acting like I'm the greatest and I've got the best chance and I'm the most, What I am is someone who cares more about you making the most objective and informed choice possible for who you want your mayor to be. Maybe that's me, maybe it isn't. Less important than making sure that I'm doing my job to educate you on the issues that I think matter most. Because like I said, we all agree on a lot of things. And where we disagree, there's a lot of nuance. And that nuance has been unexplored as far as I'm concerned in this race. Because I've gone to some of those forums. I've done some of the debates. I was on WTTW, Fox 32. Sure. I went to Kenwood Academy where we did one.
You're on ABC 7, my station.
That's right. So I'm doing it all now. I'm saying yes to everything. Yeah. I'm on the radio a bunch.
But what do you mean by the nuance?
The nuance is that, like, all these questionnaires that are coming out, right? WBEZ has one. The Trib has one. Everybody's got a questionnaire. I've got 30-plus questionnaire requests. We have hundreds and hundreds of questions that we've been asked to answer. And we've gone through the vast majority of them, too, so we're making progress. But there is no way, when you fill out those questionnaire quizzes, like if any of you all want it, you don't get a clear picture for who you should support. I filled out the WBEZ quiz, and it turns out that some candidates answered yes and some candidates answered no to a question that when you read the fine print, they agreed on. They were saying the same thing. So unfortunately, we're doing a disservice to the voters, in my opinion, by leading them astray by saying you align this percentage point with this candidate, when really you need to understand more about those candidates' positions on that issue. And you need to understand the implications to you personally in the city if these ideas are heard and executed. So rather than play this kind of game at the surface of saying, I'm for an elected school board, I'm for a hybrid school board, or I want to hire detectives and I want to abolish the police, all of that energy needs to be brought to a level where people actually understand the impact on their lives. So my job and my focus has been on providing in these final days, in the final hour, the tools and resources for you all to make up your own minds.
Now these tools are
They're
available on your website right now.
NealForMayor.com. Yeah, so there's 2 out of 3 that are available right now. There's a third one that's coming out this weekend. The 2 that are available right now is our budget tool, so that visualization thing I talked about in this receipt. And the other one, which I think is even more meaningful and powerful, is just we aggregated all of the questions that we were asked in these questionnaires, and we put them in one place in a very easily searchable Google-like interface so that when you type a word that matters to you, all of our responses to the question show up in real time. So I helped write the code myself, and I think that's a data set that doesn't exist, because the only way you would know all of the questionnaires that are going to candidates is if you were a candidate. So here I was as the only technical candidate, the only person out of the 14 that knows how to think and build systems like this to make information more accessible. So I wanted to show people what I was about, and that's what I did. And in doing so, you'll learn about me, but you'll also learn about all the other candidates. And I took a really objective approach because when you look at the results, I don't put my name at the top. We randomize the list. So when you refresh the page, it just jumbles everyone up every time. So I tried my best to just take a very open and ethical approach to it.
So who do you like, assuming that you, whether you get in the runoff or not, who else should be in the runoff?
So this is where my third project comes in.
Okay.
So my third project I'm calling KPIs, Key Performance Indicators. So this is, again, my entrepreneur tech nerd thing coming in. But when you're trying to raise money or start a business or something like that, you have to show that your plans are actually going to work. You have to prove it. And unfortunately, when you're running for office, you don't have to do that as much. You just get to talk. And you get to make promises. Every now and then, someone who knows what they're talking about is going to ask you a question. Then you have to actually dig into things. But it's rare, actually, from what I'm observing, even in my fellow candidates. And I think that's a problem. So I've actually been interacting with and coordinating with other candidates, with their policy team, to talk about the depth of their plans and to break down not only what's your position, because I can download a PDF and read your long-form platform, but what's your timeline and plan for implementation? Where is the research and the evidence saying that this is the right policy to go with? What granular steps are associated with executing this policy? And then also, what are the trade-offs? What's the reversal of this position? What's the best argument against it? And in assembling this framework, I'm not just doing it for my own positions and policies. I'm doing it with some of the candidates who I think have ideas that are worth sharing. So that's not every candidate, but I would say a majority of the candidates I've interacted with and their teams, and I'm trying to basically show folks I don't have all the right ideas. I don't have all the best ideas. We have 14 candidates, and all of them have invested tons of money into policy experts and analysts and have their own expertise that they're bringing into this race. So here we are, Chicago. We have this opportunity to solve all these problems, and we want to pick one horse that we're trying to bet on. But yet we have this wealth of information and context that we can, if we put it together, there's this word gestalt, which means the whole's greater than the sum of its parts. And that is, I think, what I can leave a lasting impression in this race about. And maybe, just maybe, there's some people that dig that.
Well, who are the people that you feel good about in terms of sharing policy ideas?
So I've reached out to all of the campaigns and candidates, with the exception of the folks that decided to run after Rahm dropped out. And the reason I did that is because I think those 4 candidates, in my opinion, thought that Rahm was doing a good enough job. So they didn't think that they needed to step up and lead until he stepped out.
And that would be Preckwinkle, Daly,
Chico,
and Mendoza.
Yeah, all due respect, but that's just, it just wasn't my speed for all of that money and all of that opportunity, or being an opportunist. That was just not, I think they're fine. They don't need my help. These other candidates, though, I think everyone, including those 4, have good ideas, just to be clear, but I don't think they need my resources or my capabilities to actually get their ideas heard.
Why are there 14? I think the 14 is creating, I think, some anxiety and confusion among voters, and everywhere I go, I hear that just too many people. I can't decipher this. It's just too many people in the race. And I think there was also an expectation that some of those folks would drop out, would not last through to the runoff. Why do you think there's 14, and is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, it's a signal of the problem we have in the city, right? If you have that many people trying to step up to run for this particular office, that means that there was a problem with that office. And I was officially 3rd in the race, probably earlier than that. I think Willie and Paul had announced before I did. But everyone has their own perspective and experience for what they'd like the city to be among the candidates. And the signature process, while inaccessible, was designed to kind of narrow the field. A surprising number of people made it through. I don't know whether it's good or bad. I'm going to have to think about that some more. But what I will say, it presents an opportunity because I want democracy. I want you all to have choices. And the people I met on the street, they wanted that too. They said if they could, they would sign 10 times over. And if they could sign for other candidates, they wish they could too, because they want to have those choices. Now, you're right, there is fatigue. There is an overwhelming feeling right now among, like, how do I decide? I don't even know these people that well. I haven't met most of them because only half can go to any given forum or event because of scheduling issues and all that. And Preckwinkle's, I think, been ducking most of the press conferences and things like that for the past month. So with that inability to actually engage and vet candidates properly, for me, I see opportunity. I say, all right, let me build some systems. Let me provide some resources and tools that helps voters have a better idea for what their options are. And I think there are going to be some folks out there that vibe with that and appreciate that, and they just might vote for me because of it.
Well, that'd be a good thing for
That's
you,
it.
right?
That's right. That's right.
Time to open it up. Questions? Yes, and we have a mic, so we'll get over with the mic.
Hi, thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure.
So I know that you've spoken a lot about your experience with tech, and I also see that an important point on your platform is to use data to reduce racial disparities. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your ideas for that.
Sure, absolutely. So there are a lot of police departments that are leveraging data and technology in a more transparent way that allow you to detect bias and the need for additional sensitivity training with trained officers that may or may not be done in Chicago right now, but it's certainly not transparent. It's not known to the public. And if it's not transparent and known to the public, then this issue of trust will never be resolved. So until we actually provide a little bit more transparency over the process by which CPD is actually training their officers, holding them accountable, and actually enforcing this consent decree, we're going to have more problems. So it kind of sums up there. But the other piece, I don't mean to go back to my little prop here, but police is number 2 on this list, right? That's $15 on the $100. So we're investing a lot of resources there, but we haven't fully embraced restorative justice or even, preventing violence from happening by investing in not just solving the symptoms and reacting to violence, but preventing it in the first place. So that's the key. To answer your question?
The young lady in front of her.
Thanks. Hi, thank you for being here. My question is, looking forward, if the mayor's race does not go as you plan, do you have intentions to stay involved in politics and maybe run for other offices?
Well, I'll tell you this, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. Like, this is home. Like, that's the thing. Like, some people, I think, come in and out, and they're trying to think about what their plans are. I just go home every day. Like, I just have dinner with my family, and I see the problems. So, like, there's no turning back for me. I don't know what position that means or what role I take. All I know is that I'm committed to making sure that in my lifetime, this city actually gets on the right track. So I get obsessive with things when I learn enough about it. So after reading through the municipal code and connecting the whole declining population thing, I was like, Neal's in.
Well, you've got a huge body of knowledge that you've gained and expertise.
Well, I want to share it.
So one of the things that come up with some of the lesser-known candidates is people ask, why run for mayor? Why not run for alderman or state representative or something that's maybe a little bit more accessible?
Well, do you want to solve the problem, or do you want to act like you're solving the problem? That was the thing. So, like, my issue was when I actually saw the root cause, yeah, I could be one of 50. And to be honest with you, I started there. I didn't start with running for mayor. I started with, okay, like, what small thing could I do? I ran a committee. I'm in 5.
Okay.
So I ran like a tech committee, a diversity council for ROM, and I contributed, and I've interacted with the city government in a number of ways. But when I really evaluated it, there's a progressive caucus, right, in the city council. There's like 11 or 12 aldermen that are in this progressive caucus. And they say a lot of the right things that vibe with me. I said, okay, these are some of the policies that I want to see real. But there's 12 of them. There's 50 aldermen, and there's an agenda that is consistently set by the mayor. So if you want to get anything done in City Hall, it better be on the mayor's agenda, otherwise it's not going to happen. I think that's flawed. So not only did I want to be mayor to make sure that the ideas I believed in were enacted, but not to wield more power. I wanted to give power back to the neighborhoods and to the communities. That's the key. So running for mayor was about actually addressing the root cause that I saw, rather than just trying to be a symptom. So,
anybody over here?
I have one before we turn it over to that side.
Okay.
But thank you so much. Again, this has been an incredible listening to you, sort of being more informed about you, but also other candidates.
we've only just begun.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So late start, but
It's fine. I'm still here. I'm in the neighborhood.
awesome. So I had a question for you regarding public service, and sort of taps on a little bit with Angela's question. So a lot of candidates have and do not have public service sort of experience. How would you make up for sort of a little bit of an absence in that faculty? And sort of, if you are not elected mayor, how would you sort of fill that gap of public service in your life moving forwards, since you kind of are in business, you are in tech, you are in activism, but what about public service? How would
when
you
you
sort
say
of
public service, I just want to
elected
clarify what you mean.
positions?
Elected positions.
Elected positions,
Got
I mean
it.
specifically, yeah.
So
Thank
not
you.
being an elected position at this point in Chicago, I think, is a feature and not a bug. Okay? So I think that the problem right now with Chicago's machine is that now that you've been in it, you've been infected by it. And unfortunately, people have been entrenched in it so long that they believe in it and they defend it, even though it's a broken system. It's kind of like that Morpheus quote in The Matrix. And it's like they're in there and they want to defend it and fight for it and justify it. And clearly on the outside, we know it's not okay, and we know it's broken. And that kind of paradigm shift, right, that disruption won't happen from the inside, because problems can't be solved by the same level of thinking that created them, right? That's one of my favorite Einstein quotes. And honestly, like, internalizing that, when I made this ridiculous, bold, crazy decision to run for mayor, that was it. So I said, all right, I'm in. Put me in the game, coach. So yeah, I think it's actually more of an opportunity to not have that experience at this point.
Anybody over here? Okay.
Right there, yeah.
Thanks for being here. I was a high school teacher for quite a while before I came getting a policy
Whereabouts?
degree. Waukegan, Illinois.
Hey, yeah, I've been up
So
there.
anyway,
Six Flags and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's other stuff too, though.
There's other stuff too.
But that is the identifier. No, so I was wondering, I've heard a lot of different people talking about what to do with especially the shuttered schools. That's kind of like one of the, I don't want to say punchlines that everybody kind of keeps coming back to. I haven't heard anybody talk about actually creating an office. I don't know if you could explain a little bit more, maybe like who the target audience is. Sure. Is that high school grads who aren't going to college? Yeah. Is that adults who need some retraining? Do you see that kind of incorporating with the current model of the city colleges? Do you see labor getting involved? Do you see, yeah, I'm just, if you could explain a little bit more.
Thank you for asking that. And to be actually real with you, I think you're the first person to ask me about this. So thank you. So I actually have direct experience doing some form of this, both with New York City and what they're doing there through the company that acquired my school, Full Stack Academy. But also, I worked with our current mayor on a pilot program to do just that. So back in 2012, when my school was kind of getting off the ground and we were doing really well, we implemented a vocational training curriculum through CPS and the city colleges. So we had this big announcement, podium, news press, and all that, and we did 2 years of program development and training with these teachers. The problem was teaching 40-plus teachers the STEM curriculum. We needed more time, more money, and more investment to actually take a holistic approach to doing it. And a lot of those programs fell flat because the follow-through in Chicago is one of our greatest flaws. We make lots of promises and there's tons of press releases about all these great initiatives and programs, but we don't follow through on it. So my vision for this vocational office would be to make sure that we're not just addressing the technical education, but there's lots of pathways to new jobs and the future of work that could be repurposing these 50 schools that we closed and a lot of other buildings, especially on the south and west sides. So I have direct experience teaching people right out of high school how to not just go to college, but to get vocational training in trade schools and skills, but also adults of all ages. So what we would do is in order to flip our population decline, I keep looking south and west, but it's because I can see it. I know exactly where I would want these places to go and the people who would want to be lured back in. But we'd have to make these locations in these neighborhoods places where people are clawing back to live in and to own property in because they get access to these trade schools and these opportunities. So if we do that through this office, I think we could make a lot of progress in a way that we've never really done. And there's no other candidate more qualified to do it. So whether I'm a candidate or not, or whether I'm mayor or not, that's an idea I plan to see through.
And so you would repurpose some of these schools to do that?
Absolutely.
And what would go on in those buildings?
So what we would do is we would do two things. One is we would work with employers, locally in Chicago especially, to make sure that the pathways to actually getting people these job opportunities, not just downtown but building new opportunities, is clear through our curriculum. And then the other thing that we would do, and this is something that a lot of people want, is they want to be independent. They want to start their own business. They want to grow a small business or be independent or at least try to do it. And in doing so, they come out with a skill that allows them to be more employable. So those are the two big buckets of what we need to get done. And I have my existing schools and models and partner programs to show like the actual work and the case studies to say that this stuff works. So, yeah. He's got a mic right there. Yep.
Well, thanks for coming in today, and I'm particularly grateful, having been to a few of these events, that you are the only candidate that has brought in the tech discussion to this race. So that's great. I do have a question, however, concerning your vision for the mayor, and you spoke eloquently about the need to return Chicago into a weak mayor system. Yes. You identify yourself as an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs and weak executive leadership seem to be oxymorons. Because entrepreneurs are inherently disruptive. If we looked at some of the other entrepreneurs that have served, executive office, Mayor Bloomberg, Donald Trump, they tend to be strong characters. And even as you responded to Laura's question about why run for mayor rather than run for alderman, you gave me the impression of a typical entrepreneur of, I have no patience, I need to get things done. That seemed to be contradict with the vision for weak mayor, for having a weak mayor. So my question is, how can you reassure us that you would abide by, follow through with this vision for Chicago being having a weak mayoral system?
Thank you so much for asking that. That's an amazing question. my emphasis on government accountability is what got me into this race. So my obsession with solving the system problem and not caring as much about myself, I think even how I'm playing out my final days should show you that my enthusiasm isn't around my own hubris, and instead it's around my concern for my family and my community. So my energy, don't get it twisted, isn't like I'm great and I'm the boss and I'm smart. No, I'm okay. I'm not an expert in all these areas. I don't know everything, but what I do know is that if we allow this system as it exists to continue, more people will die, more people will leave the city, and we will be worse off than we deserve to be right now. That's it. So when you look at my government accountability platform, you'll see I am for term limits. Whether city council approves it for the mayor or not, self-imposed term limits. Campaign finance reform. Any money I get, anybody who's donated to my campaign, I've already promised and committed that if I'm in office, I will make public if I ever meet with them or speak with them. Okay? There's no other candidate who's committed to doing that. And the reason being is because those donors don't want you to know that they get those phone calls. That's a problem. And the other piece is around this budget transparency stuff. No one else is willing to commit to actually giving you a receipt to pay when you pay your taxes because, showing you where your money's going when they make those decisions is compromising to the mayor's ability to move swiftly and act swiftly. And I'm just not interested in that. So don't take my word for it. Look at these positions, look at these policies, and help me enact them when I become mayor, or kick me out. Fire me, man. Like, I don't want to be there for that long. I just want to help get the ball rolling. I think the greatest mayor of Chicago is probably in a classroom right now. And we need to set the city up for that person to be successful. So, does that answer your question? Okay.
That's a great answer. I appreciate that.
Hit me with your best shot.
If nobody else has one, I want to just sort of jump on something that's hot in the news. We were talking about it a little bit upstairs earlier, the Jussie Smollett case, which will seem like it will never go away.
That's right.
And of course, today he turned himself in and he was arraigned and bond was set, et cetera, et cetera. We were talking a little bit about this and the media fascination with this case. In some ways, is sort of taken a lot of attention. Not just this case, but other stories have rolled out.
Yes.
But what do you make of the media fascination, and what is the role the social media? We talked a little bit about the role that social media has played in that, and is that a good or a bad thing?
I think in this case, it was a bad thing. And there are plenty of cases where it's a good thing. And unfortunately, we can't allow a bad apple to ruin the bunch in the sense that a lot of people still need to be heard. And these platforms have given voice to people who very seldom had the ability to be heard and be seen as credible. So with all that being said, I agree with Superintendent Eddie Johnson and his sentiments this morning and what he said.
For those who may not have heard.
Yeah, so he essentially said he wishes that a level of coverage was actually addressing the true crimes in the city, the murders that are happening, the violent issues that are happening in the city. If the press were as worried about that at the national level as they were about the news around this hoax, then maybe we'd make more progress as a city. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. And it is just the nature of our reality right now. We have a president of the United States who's obsessed with the software platform, Twitter. And what people don't know, and I'm going to nerd out for a second here, is that platform is Chicago technology. People don't know that. Ruby on Rails, that's what we teach at the University of Chicago here on Tuesday afternoons. We teach the coding framework that was what built Twitter back in 2004. And that was born in the West Loop here in Chicago at this company called Basecamp that I work with, and that's where my headquarters are. And anyway, so it's just cool to know that we're building these systems and these tools, and unfortunately, most of us are consumers. And my whole purpose in my life has been to convert more people from just consumption to creation and curiosity. So as we talk about how to actually address this issue with the media and coverage and what issues matter most, how can we actually enable the future to be invented in Chicago? Rather than trying to lure Amazon here and having all these tech companies swoop in and give us jobs, why don't we invest more in our communities to inspire folks to start the next great ethical tech company? Because that's another major issue when it comes to data, privacy, and just a lot of human rights issues. So,
are you suggesting that the big tech companies out there, like the Facebooks and Twitters, are not ethical?
Well, what's the customer? So this, I don't want to be in class, but I'm a high school teacher too. So I taught at neighborhood school, Diet High School for the Arts last year. And one of my favorite lectures, and I did it with them, is when I talk about users, customers, and products. And I say, okay, who's the user here? You're on Facebook. They're on Facebook. All right, I'm the user. Okay, who's the customer? advertisers. And they eventually get it, and they realize that the ads is how Facebook makes money. I go, okay, well, what are the advertisers buying? What's the product? And they sit there and they think about it. And then eventually I go, it's you. You're the product. Your eyeballs, where you click, what you type in those private messages that aren't so private, everything that you're saying and doing on this website is being sold to someone who wants to sell you something. And then you see their light bulbs go off over their heads, the aha moment. And they're like, oh, wow. Like they're taking advantage of me, and I didn't even realize it. And I said, well, yeah, these are billion-dollar tech companies that are built by people who don't look like you, aren't from where you're from, don't understand what you're going through, and just want to sell you things. How do you feel about that? Do you want to change that? Do you want to understand how to actually make these tools yourself so that they're designed for the people in your community that you actually want to help, rather than just using it for entertainment and consumption? So when you teach people lessons like that and you give them those opportunities, and then you look like this, which is, I think as a black male, there's less than 5% of us that are in CPS teaching. They say you can't be what you can't see, but what are we showing them? So that's everything for me. Weaving in technology for social change and making sure that Chicago's on a better path, because our young people actually have opportunities to live here and stay here because we care about them and we're showing them that. Because right now we're not.
And showing them a path that may make them a bear someday.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wanted to go to the NFL. Right? When I was in high school, I went to Mount Carmel High School, right over here on 64th and Stony. And I went there because I wanted to play football, because I was a good athlete. I was a junior Olympian. And I said, all right, I want to go to a D1 school and I want to get a scholarship. And then senior year, I got a back injury. Back spasm, out. Uh-oh, now what? Yeah. So when I was no longer an athlete, I had to go, okay, I guess I need to be good at math and like things like that in school.
Well, that's an interesting jump from that to
math.
math.
I was like, I have to get good at things, right? So and thankfully I was a good student up till that point, but it was all of my energy and motivation was around making that progress, because I wanted to make money. NFL players made money, and we didn't have money, so I wanted it. So when I got to Northwestern, and you all are at UChicago, when you get here and you know people who want to make money, they study econ and want to get into finance and go into consulting and investment banking. That's what we all want. So I started doing that, and I got so lucky, because right freshman year, just a couple months in, I ended up founding my first tech company. Had no idea what I was doing, but we started that company. And that was after I had an internship working in municipal bonds, oddly enough. And from that experience, I realized that what I cared about most wasn't making money. It was helping people and helping them figure out like how to make progress, and providing them with goods and services that added value to their lives, so that they were spending less money than the value they were getting from anything that I was able to provide to them. And that became my obsession. So sure, you can call it entrepreneurship. I call it public service, right? That's what that is, helping people.
Fabulous. Well, thanks for, do we have any more questions?
Yeah, I'm happy to take them.
Okay. All right.
So it's been clear from just what we've learned from you today, and perhaps those of us who have been keeping an eye on you, we see that
Who's
you.
keeping an eye on me? Somebody? I'm just kidding. I hope so.
I've known about your candidacy for a while, and we see that you go all in with the things that you do.
For better or for worse.
And you've really gone all in with this campaign in ways that perhaps, while not visible, they're meaningful. And as one of the youngest candidates for mayor, you've come to learn a lot about this process, yes. Some of which you've shared with us already, how difficult it is to get on the ballot. What are other things that you have gleaned from being involved in this political process that you would want people that are your age, that are our age here to know? Because I think you have extracted perhaps so much valuable information, and for that reason alone, I wish there were more people in this room to hear. So what would you leave us with?
Thank you.
It's streaming out there live.
We're
going to hear a lot more people. You're going to hear
Thank
this.
you
Go ahead.
so much for asking that. It got me really excited. I almost want to jump out of my seat, right? Because when I learn things that I think are awesome or interesting or important, I want to share it. I just want everyone to know, right? That's the teacher in me. And there's a quote that comes to mind from someone that I'm sure you all know, Michelle Obama. She said this recently. She said, I've been in the room with some of the most powerful people in the world. They are not that smart. And let me tell you, Chicago, you all are far more qualified to run for office than a lot of people that I've seen in city government. Now take that in. Just think about it for a second.
Who was she talking to?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
So
You look it up though.
She was referring to people, Chicagoans?
No,
in
she was
general?
talking about her experience with, President Obama, going around and being with worldly leaders and people who were in charge of countries and major systems. And she basically said, these are just human beings. That's what I learned, is that we're just all human beings. And everybody's bringing something to the table, but we're not that much smarter than each other. So if you've ever thought that you could never do something, oh, I could never run for office, or I could never do that, no, man, you can. If you care enough, you absolutely can. And it was the same deal with me 10 years ago when I didn't think I could be technical. I graduated from the School of Education and Social Policy. What am I doing as an adjunct professor teaching engineering entrepreneurship at Northwestern? What am I doing teaching coding and software development at the University of Chicago? That doesn't make any sense. But I did it, and it's the same deal now with running for office. So if you've thought about running, if you think that there's something you can do or there's a way that you can make a difference or contribute, not only are you qualified, I'm on the record right now to help you do it, right? You don't need to know me, and you can just take whatever I can give you, but I want to help you see that through, and you are absolutely qualified to try.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think we need to wrap it up now. Neal Sáles-Griffin, you've been
Thank you.